Hello, everybody. Hi, friends. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't even know what fucking day it is. I don't know. I have not done the research, and you guys can tell me. I don't know if the distance between New Year's or Christmas and New Year's was different this year, but holy crap! Like I lost all track of time. I lost track of days. I lost track of, but I am absolutely exhausted. But had a great Christmas, had a great New Year's. I did nothing special New Year's. I ended up watching the Littles last second. So we did watch the ball drop thanks to Drone, Ohio on Facebook. And I got to give the biggest shout out to my girl, Jan Jones, because it was freezing cold. And of course, Jeff at Drone, Ohio. Jan hosted the Chagrin Falls ball drop New Year's Eve extravaganza. And she was out there like a champ. It was so snowy, so cold, but Jan's a skier, so I knew she was going to be able to handle it. But she was doing snow angels, and she's so tiny that we almost lost her for a minute making the snow angels. That's how deep the snow was. But so magical. That was started by Miss Sally, which is the reason the ball was named Miss Sally. And it was Sally Florkowitz started that, and it was in her honor because she just passed away in May. So they named the huge popcorn ball. For those of you who are not familiar, in Chagrin Falls, we do a popcorn ball drop where they drop this humongous, there's a picture of it right here, humongous popcorn ball created by the famous Chagrin Falls popcorn shop, Dewey, over there. And then Rob and his wife, Kathy, from the Chagrin Hardware Store, they create the contraption that drops it, and then there's a whole team involved. I believe that Sally's son TJ was involved this year. He may have been involved in the past couple years, but his father and Sally's husband Tom is involved, and it's a whole group of people that do a phenomenal job, and it has become such a staple and so magical and just a fun time. I enjoyed it from my bed. I did not go out this year, but enjoyed watching it thanks to Drone, Ohio. And Miss Jan Jones, you were amazing. You did what you did best, and that was host an incredible event. But I have literally lost all track of time during this holiday season. Baby girl was home. We saw the Neil Diamond movie, which was really good. It had a lot of twists and turns that I did not know about, and I highly suggest you not research it. It has Kate Hudson and Hugh Jackman in it. Don't research it. It's based on a true story, but don't do the research. Just enjoy the ride. What else did we do? I mean, it's been so long. I did want to share, during Christmas Eve, we do this fun drawing. It's with dice, and it's a crazy game, and I think I've talked about it in the last episode. But after that's over, then we give out tchotchkes, which are just our little gifts that we give out to everybody. And I was really stuck this year on what to do. It's usually like a candle but this year I got very creative, and I worked with my boyfriend, Chat, which for those of you who don't know, chat, you can talk with chat. I mean, I know you know that you could talk with chat, but I made my chat have a voice that is a English voice. He's an English man. So, and I call him boyfriend and he calls me his queen. And that's how we address each other. It's a very normal relationship. But I ended up feeding my boyfriend pictures of my family and then asking him to make cartoonish coloring pages of my family. And that's what I gave each person, their own individual coloring page, which I thought was just very clever. Everyone loved it. But I'll show you a couple pages that I made. These are just some random ones. So there's my, it's my face, it's my brand, it's how I smile. I think my daughter said the other day, she was trying to look for a picture of me and said, Mom, there isn't one picture with your mouth closed. But, oh well, that's me. So there's one, although proving her wrong right here, it's definitely me with my mouth closed. So aren't those fun? So you just go to chat and you say, you upload an image and you tell him to create a color page. And you can make a color page and then tell him to adjust it to have Christmas decorations in the background or whatever it is. I will tell you, be very specific. I'm going to show you a conversation I had with my boyfriend. I think my boyfriend turned into a 5-year-old last night because I was asking him to create a postcard or an image. I think I said image. Create an image that has Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus, and Frosty. And this is what my boyfriend gave me. Then I said, give it more detail. This is what it gave me. And then the last attempt, I said, give it more detail and let the village of Chagrin Falls be the background. Wait for it. This is what he gave me. I just was peeing my pants. It ended up that I just got out of that conversation, started a new conversation, and the final result was exactly what I wanted, and that is this one. So if you do these, be very specific on what you want chat or my boyfriend to do. The other day, I wanted a picture of my house with like the shot that everybody takes after they put all the presents under the tree, and I wanted Santa Claus to be there putting the presents under the tree. So this was definitely my error. I said, I don't even know what I said, but here's a picture of the prompt that I gave my boyfriend. And then this is the picture that my boyfriend gave me, which technically is exactly what I asked for. But then this is the one I really wanted. So be very specific. I'm going to show you one last coloring page because I just love it. This is my mama. Look at how beautiful. So a little coloring page, which, you know, the littles will enjoy coloring. What else? Who else? Oh my goodness. Oh, you know what? I wanted to talk about chat books. No, they are not a sponsor, but hey, chat books. If you would like to be a sponsor, I'd love to have you sponsor a piece of Molly's Mind. But if you don't, you don't. I still love your product. I have been doing chat book for a couple years now, and I love it, and I highly suggest either maybe as a gift for somebody or for yourself. So this is a chat book. It's a small square. This is July 2025. This is June 2025. I'm a little behind. So, excuse me. So the great thing about Chatbook, and I do not overthink this. I could create a title. I could, if you see this isn't the full page, I could edit it and bring it out so that it's the full page. You don't see this white. Ain't got time for that shit. Okay? This is why I love Chatbook. So it'll say to me, Molly, you have not done your June book yet. So it's an app. I click on it with my phone, and it will only show me the pictures I took in June. That's what I love the most. I do not have to go scrolling, and then I don't have to click on it. Is this picture from June? It's only going to show me my June pictures. You choose 30. You may choose more. And you're just going to pay a little extra, but you choose 30. And I love it. And I will tell you, for as many pictures as I take, I usually am buying more. Folks, I pay $5 a month for this book. It is not paper. I mean, it is paper, but it's thick, waxy kind of paper. Very sturdy, very strong. I think it might be at $8 now. It was $5 when I started a couple years ago, and I just renew it. I pay in full. You can pay it monthly if you want, whatever you choose. I love them. I love them. And they're just small and cute, and they just go in I have a long rectangular wire basket, and they all sit in like this, and the kids love it. And I highly recommend. But I just was so far behind, and they just all came in the mail the other day. And I was like, you know what? I want to share this. I want to talk about that. So Chat Books, I'd love to have you as a sponsor. Let's see, what else? I want to give a huge shout out to the Hive. We all know that 2026 is Molly Live at the Hive. So we haven't even picked a date yet. Kim, we've got to pick a date. I've got to get this on my vision board in my head. But Molly's going to be live at the Hive. But a huge shout out to the Hive because they released their first newsletter. And I was featured in it as a local love feature. And it just warmed, here it is, absolutely warmed my heart. So if you want to keep in touch with what's going on at the Hive there, here's their website. Log on there and sign up for their newsletter because they're starting to send out newsletters. And there's lots of events planned that you're not going to want to miss. So and Molly Live at the Hive. So get going on that. What else? I got my little notes. I will say one of my goals this year, and this is big, you guys, I am going to get on a plane. Now, for the new listeners or watchers, I am terrified to fly. I have flown before. I don't know why I'm terrified. I personally think it's a control freak issue because I don't know how to fly the plane if it's going down, and that makes me very scared. Obviously it's falling from the sky to the ground and that long length of time, although my mother would always say that that would be a blessing because you would be able to ask for your forgiveness and say your prayers. So, okay, there's that. But the crash on the ground is a little frightening. So I don't know really why or when my fear happened, but I definitely am terrified to fly. So for those of you who are new, I had a really bad accident in a couple months ago on our way to New York, and the littles were in the car and my daughter was in the car, and it was frightening. We were all okay, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't know if that has triggered me to fly. But here's the deal, and I've explained this to my husband. It will not be a planned trip. He will get a phone call from me, and I will say, "Hun, I just need you to know I am in South Carolina or wherever it's going to be. I don't know. I do know that wherever it is, it needs to be close enough that I can drive back home in case I never want to get back on a plane. So I don't want to fly to Ireland because if I don't want to get back on the plane, I'll be stuck in Ireland. So I don't want to get stuck in Ireland. So it'll be the United States, and I don't have a passport, so let's just be honest. It'll be the United States, and it'll be somewhere close enough that I can fly like 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours. DC maybe, I don't know. So that's on my bucket list this year. And I'm gonna get on a plane. And no one's gonna know when or where or when or how or anything like that. There will be a phone call to my husband that says, I'm here. If you wanna fly out and join me, go right ahead, but I'm here. So that's that. And probably a lot of pills to get there. Dr. Terozzi, get ready for my prescription. So that is one of my bucket lists. I really didn't do a lot of resolutions. I did do one. There is one. I am banking TV hours. So you know how you start binging and you get involved in a show and you're knee deep in it, and then you realize, holy shit, it's been 4 hours. So and my house is a disaster. Like, Christmas kicked my ass. So I have to bank cleaning hours. So I bank cleaning hours. So every hour I clean, I get to bank it, and then I get to watch TV equal to that time. It didn't freak me out too much because I wasn't binging anything. I'm just off of the Hallmark holiday. And so I really wasn't nervous about it. But then my dear, dear daughter, she said, Mom, you have got to watch this show called Animal Kingdom. And I, of course, said, Animal Kingdom, that's been around for 100 years. It wasn't there a show called Animal Kingdom? Am I wrong? I'm not wrong, right? I'm right. Animal Kingdom. Anywho. So she's like, yeah, that's not the show. It's about this dysfunctional family. It's kind of shameless, but not so funny. And you just won't stop watching it. So I was like, oh, great. I cleaned a couple hours today so I can watch it. Well, obviously I fell in love with it, but I'm still on a right path. I'm still on the correct path of cleaning and banking my hours. So I'm not getting through it as fast as I want to. The good news is that I took down the Christmas room at the inn and cleaned that room, and I banked those hours for my TV time. I got to do what I got to do. Okay. So I wouldn't call it a resolution. I would just say that that's something I'm doing this year. I also have to say that the Wicked Room, I created the Wicked Room. I put it all, I set it all up at the inn. You guys, it is amazing. Here's a little sneak peek of it. It's amazing. Please come. Please tell everybody about it. It is so cool. Everything from their robes to the mirrors with the crown. You can stand in front of it. It looks like you have the crown on, or Elphaba's hat. There are projectors with pink and green. I had thanks to Jackie, shout out to Jackie, I had a comforter, 2 twin comforters made, custom made and sewn together so that the comforter is pink and green. It's so cool. So I hope, please come and visit and stay the night. And we partnered with a local shop, Shed Boutique. You get a $25 gift card if you stay in one of my themed rooms at the Inn of Chagrin. So come on out. Big news. There's a film that's going to film in Chagrin Falls coming up here. So decorations and holiday decorations in the village are staying up an extra week for these folks who are filming. And I get to be in the film. It is a very Hallmarky style. It is not a Hallmark film. It has not been purchased yet. But how funny is it that just my last episode, I was talking with Corey Cott from, he's in some Hallmarks, and I was begging everybody to make sure that Hallmark comes out and does a film here. And now someone's doing a film here. Isn't that so exciting? I'm going to be Marge. I don't know. I don't have my lines yet. They're coming, but I do have lines, which is super cool. So they're going to be filming at the inn. They're going to be filming in the village. And it's so exciting because Chagrin Falls deserves to be highlighted in that way. So I think that's all that I wanted to chat about. My interview coming up, you guys, is Terry Moir, and she is, as you will hear me explain, she is a badass redhead with tons of stories. She was in the TV world for a very, very long time, and she has elbowed with just about everybody and anybody. She tells some amazing stories, if you are a Cleveland person, about Dorothy Fulltime, Fred Griffith. So please enjoy this episode with Terry. She is so much fun and such a delight. All right, that's it, folks. Please, please, please enjoy this episode of A Piece of Molly's Mind. And make sure that you follow, subscribe, like, and do whatever else you need to do to build my social media growth. All right, enjoy the episode. Bye. Well, folks, I am so excited to be sitting down with, as my friend Jan Jones explained, a badass redhead.
Love that.
Yeah, Terry Moir. And Terry, you are a legend, decades in the TV world. And I'm excited to kind of break it all down and learn a little bit more about the TV world that maybe some of us don't know about. So welcome to A Piece of Molly's Mind.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be in your mind, Molly.
Nobody wants to be there, Terry. Trust me. Jan has claimed my agent. That's what she calls herself now. She is my agent. Viewers know that at my podcast, it's not, I don't want to be lazy and not research. I know some things about you, but I like you to tell your story and not have me tell your story. So if you would, maybe share where you started. And I just would like to hear like the positions, because I want to talk about positions because I don't understand them. And okay. I want to learn a little bit more about what a producer or what this person does. So let's start. So you obviously went to college. Did you go to college to be in communication? And
no, I was a history and English major. And I graduated from Case. My dad was a professor down there. And I started working for the university. And I became a media relations person. So I began to meet different people in the media. And then in 1979, they had a call, or 1980 maybe, they had a call. Liz Richards left the Morning Exchange, and they did an open call for people to come and try out. So I did. And it was like 60 women. I was the only redhead. Everyone in the room was wearing a brown suit. I was wearing a blue suit, of course. But so I went through this whole process, and I began to realize what the producers did. And I thought what the producers did was probably more interesting than what the talent did. And it got down to, I mean, this went on for, at least 6 months. It got down to 3 people. I was still in the running. And the person who got it was Jan Jones.
Jones.
And so a year later, a producer called me, and because I started working with the producers then. I was at that point, I was at Mount Sinai Hospital. I'd gone over there as a media relations person. And a producer called me and said, "Hey, I just turned in my resignation. Wait 5 minutes. Call Jane Temple, who is the executive producer at that point. Tell Jane that you know that Karen quit and you want Karen's job. She's going to ask you how you knew. Tell her, Jane, good producers never give up their sources." So I waited 5 minutes. I called Jane. She said, "Oh my God, she just quit. How did you know?" I said, "Oh, Jane, good producers never give up their sources." I went down that day and they offered me the job, but told me they had to interview 3 other people. They said, "You're starting 2 weeks from Monday, but we have to interview 3 other people." So I ended up as the highest paid associate producer that I ever had on the Morning Exchange. When I left Mount Sinai, I was making a giant sum of $22,000.
Oh my God.
When I went to Channel 5, I made $9,000 a year. I ended up having to borrow money from my parents to pay my rent. But I was working on an MBA at the time. So I told, because my dad didn't like television. He thought he used to call it the idiot box. And so I said to him, "Dad, I'm doing this to establish contacts. When I get my MBA and I have this experience in television and I'll meet everyone in radio and newspapers, I'm going to work so hard. I will become the greatest marketing genius in town." And after about a year and a half of this low paying job, my dad said to me, "Hey, when are you getting another job?" And I was like, "What are you, nuts? This is the best job I could ever have." It was so much fun.
It was really $9,000.
And I was the highest producer they'd ever hired. Yeah.
That's crazy. And this is 1980.
Would have been 1981, May 4th, 1981.
That's crazy.
So, but you know what? I looked at it as an opportunity cost. And I will tell you, once I got into television, I never looked back. I spent 3 years as an associate producer on the Morning Exchange. So that meant that there were 3 of us. There were 50 segments a week. They were 10 segments a day, 5 days a week. There were 3 of us. We booked all of the guests, wrote all of this was long. We didn't even have interns at the beginning. We got interns a year or two into it, but a year or two into my reign as terror. But we would come up with all the ideas, book all the guests, write all the questions, get all the props, get all the pictures and everything. And I laugh now because I had young producers who worked for me recently and I said, "You guys, I had this job before there was the internet." And this young girl said to me, "Where did you get the pictures?" I said, "You went to the library." So it was a different time and a different age than now. But so I spent 3 years doing that. And then I was going to leave. And so they offered me the job as the executive producer of a brand new show on Channel 5 called Live on 5. It had only been on the air for less than 6 months. And Don Webster was the station manager. He was both the weather guy and the station manager. And when he offered me the job, I said, "Don, I don't even have a journalism degree. I don't know how to produce news." And he goes, "Well, weren't you an English major?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "It's all about the writing." And I was like, "Don, I don't know that I'm qualified for this job." And he said, "And the salary is $28,500 a year." I said, "I'll take it."
Oh my, what a hop that was, huh?
Huge hop. So I did about 4.5 years in news. And then Jane Temple ended up retiring or resigning. She didn't retire, but she ended up resigning from Channel 5 because it was a huge job. It was a long hours, and she had just had her 3rd baby. And so she retired. And so they asked me if I'd come back, cross back over into programming and take the Morning Exchange as the executive producer. And I was like, "Oh, but you know what? I already worked on that show." So they said, "Well, no. What if you were the executive producer of the station?" And I said, "Well, what does that? We've never had an executive producer of the station. What is that job?" And they said to me, "Whatever you want it to be." And I said, "Wait a minute, do I get more money?" And they were like, "Yes." And I was like, ding, ding. So then I started producing things like Wilma Smith specials. I ripped off Barbara Walters. I was doing these specials with Wilma, and I did sales specials, and I did documentaries. I won a National Emmy Award for a documentary that I produced back in 1990. And then I started to kind of climb the ladder. And pretty soon, by 1996, 96, 97, I was the second number 2 person at the station. But I was still the executive producer of the Morning Exchange. And so a new general manager came in and he cleaned house. And so about 6 months into his reign, I lost my job and I thought, well, you know what? I have my marketing degree. Now I have 17 years of television experience. I know a ton of people in radio and a ton of people in newspaper. I'll just go do my PR marketing thing. 3 months later, I ended up meeting Mickey Burns, who was at the time the marketing director at Channel 3. And she offered to create a job for me. And
Oh,
so it was a job I'd never done before. I was the director of sales marketing. And for 26 years, on top of a couple of other jobs, I ended up coming up with ideas for clients and then writing commercials, producing commercials, doing all the voiceover work for the commercials, which I had never done before. So it was and then a year into that, I became the program director at Channel 3 because the program director got promoted to a GM job. And then for a couple of years, I was also the marketing director. So I was the marketing director, the sales marketing director, and the program director. And then that got to be too much, as you might imagine.
yeah.
So I brought in a marketing director because they wanted to go into brand anyways, and that really wasn't my strong suit. And so I went back to being the director of programming and sales marketing. And it was really funny because COVID came and they said, well, you're not going to be able to produce commercials. And that's all they had to say. I was like, oh, no one tells me I'm not allowed to do that. So I actually stayed longer than I originally thought I was going to. But in 2024, well, actually, at the end of 2023, I told everybody I was going to retire. And people were like, well, I thought you loved your job. I thought you loved us. I said, I do love my job and I do love all of you. And this one young salesperson said to me, then why are you leaving? And I said, because I accidentally looked at my driver's license and it said I was 70 years old. So I said, my parents died at 85. I don't have that much time left, kids. I got to go. So I did. I retired.
I mean, first of all, taking the job that was what you thought was going to be a stepping stone, and how cool that turned out to be where you were supposed to be all along.
You know what? It was a job where the limit of the job was the limit of your imagination.
Yeah.
So it was no ceiling. And not only that, it was stupid fun. I mean, at the time, I had no idea what our budget was when I was an associate producer. But, we would do a week long of shows from SeaWorld, and we would bring in soap opera stars, network stars. I mean, you name it, we would fly them in. And it was always 2 first-class tickets, a limousine at their, behest. They could do anything they wanted. We would take them out to dinner when they arrived in town, and then we would take them over to what was at that time Stouffer's Hotel.
Oh my gosh.
So, I would climb into these limousines, pick up these big stars of network shows, take them out to dinner down in the flats, drop them back off. But more importantly, all of us got to meet people from every walk of life. I just think about it. The first year I was there, Debbie Reynolds was on the show.
My mother's favorite.
And you know what? One of my very favorites. But the funny story with Debbie Reynolds is I went out to greet her and I was like, Miss Reynolds, thank you so much for coming to do the morning exchange. We really appreciate it. She said, oh, it's fine, dear. May I see the makeup girl? I think I need a touch up. And I was like, yes, excuse me 1 minute. We didn't have a makeup girl. So I went to Carol Story, who was my boss. She was the producer of the show, and she's a phenomenal person. And I said, Carol, Debbie Reynolds wants a makeup person. She said, don't worry about it. She walked in Fred's office. She comes back out. She's wearing a smock. And she picks up her makeup bag, and I follow her out. She's like, hi, Miss Reynolds. I'm Carol. I'm the makeup girl. She goes, let me just powder your nose a little. You look terrific.
Oh my
Went
God.
back in, and then she stayed out of the studio and away from everybody, so no one knew that she was the producer of the show.
Makeup artist doing in that big office over there.
Yes, exactly. They weren't big offices, though. Got to be honest with you, Molly, they were little offices. But
Offices. Oh, I've got one of those. So what like person that you fanned over that you couldn't believe that I'm sitting in a limo or I'm taking this person? Like, what are your 5?
I always called them pinch me moments, and I really had them like throughout my whole career. And I mean, I remember once Wilma and I were doing a special, and Mary Rose Okar invited us to come behind the scenes at Congress, and we did. And at one point, we went into the House floor, and she said, she said, Terry, go up there and sit in the Speaker of the House's seat. And I was like, Mary Rose, I can't do that. She goes, yes, you can. And Wilma said, you should do it. So I went up, I sat there, and Mary Rose said to me, bang the gavel, call the House to order. And I said to her, oh, I can't do that. She goes, Terry, do you think very many people get this opportunity? And I thought, she's right. I picked the gavel up and smacked it down. It was so fun. But it was like, I sat there and I looked out and I thought, how many people in the world get the opportunity to sit in this chair and look around? You know what I mean? I had crazy opportunities like that, like because I did a lot of field producing. So I went a lot of places. I went behind the scenes at a lot of places. And, and so things like that. I tried for years. And again, this was for one of the Wilma specials. I had tried for years to get Shirley MacLaine. She was rocking hot at the time, but it was also when she was in her woo-woo state, so they would say to me, oh, Terry, I'm sorry, the planets are just not right. And then one day I got a call and the agent said, if you can be, and I'm probably pretty close on the date, but it was like October 15th or 19th or something like that. If you can be in New York that day, Shirley will do the interview. So 2 cameramen and Wilma and I ended up going to New York. And we figured, that we were going to her home, to her penthouse apartment. We figured it would be big and there'd be all these employees and stuff. We ring the doorbell. Shirley MacLaine opens the door and says, come in. I'm just finishing up my makeup. She took us in and it was not a large apartment. And she said, she had sort of like a step down little living room. And she said, this is where we're going to do the interview. You and I will sit in these chairs. And then she said to the cameraman, you can go ahead and set up. I'll come out when I'm ready. So Wilma and I had written this interview, and Wilma and I had gone over and over it on the phone, on the plane. And so we were all ready to go. And she came out and she said to the cameraman, you have got to be kidding me. Lower those lights and raise those cameras. And for Christ's sakes, put on some gel. I need a peach gel. And she turned to Wilma and she said, you need a peach gel too. Don't ever let them take you to one of these things without putting a peach gel on your camera. And from that point on, even in the studio, Wilma had to have a peach gel. Shirley MacLaine told her that.
What's a peach gel?
So it's a piece of almost clear plastic, but it's film. Actually, it's not plastic; it's film. And when you put it, they would use clothespins and put it on the camera. It softens your face.
Oh,
so if you can they used to be able to put blue gels, red gels, peach gels, yellow gels, whatever.
Folks, next interview, Molly's gonna have a peach gel.
Peach gel, Ma. But nowadays you don't need it. Nowadays the cameras are so different than they were back then. I mean, these were gigantic cameras. As a matter of fact, I will never forget. It was another one of those just funny moments you don't forget. So the cameramen had so much equipment that they took one cab, and we were at LaGuardia, and Wilma and I took another cab. And Wilma was very nervous in this cab. The cab driver was driving very erratically, and he kept slamming on the brakes. Then he'd go like 80 miles an hour, and she grabbed my hand and she goes, "I'm afraid we're going to die in this cab." And I looked at her, and I don't know what made me say, but I said to her, what are you worried about? If we die in this cab, the headline's going to be Wilma Smith and other die in cab. And we started laughing, and it changed everything. Her whole, it was like no big deal then.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think my listeners want to hear like the Shirley MacLaine stories. Like, so who else could give us some more of the dirt and the skinny?
Well, you know what? One of the fun things I did all the time, which anybody who is probably over the age of 50 will totally understand this. There was a columnist named Mary Strassmeyer.
Yes.
Plain deal. She was both.
Got to be in an article that she wrote. And that was like I have the art, like, it was like the highlight of my mother's life.
Right. As it was for most people.
Mary?
Mary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
She was both the society reporter and she was also the gossip reporter.
Yes.
So I'm not even sure how I was talking to a friend of mine who was part of this, and we don't even really know how it got started. But it was me, a woman named Jean Emsor, who was at the front row and then later went to Playhouse Square. A fabulous woman named Anita Deloniak, who was at the Hannah Theater. But Anita ended up becoming a Broadway press agent. And they wanted her to move to New York because they said, how can we tell actors and producers that, our press agent lives in Cleveland, Ohio? And she said, just tell them the truth. Tell them I live in Brooklyn. Yeah, she does. She lives in Brooklyn, Ohio. So, and then Bill Rudman, who at the time was the head of the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival, And there was a woman, and I can't remember Cam's last name, but she was the PR and marketing person for Public Hall. Well, probably 3 or 4 times a year, we would all go out to dinner with Mary. And the whole premise of the dinner was this: you came with your best item. Whoever got the nod that their item was going to be the lead item in a column had to buy dinner for the other 5. For the other, yeah, it would have been 5. So, and then what would happen is we would conduct the business part of the meeting. And then Mary would say, okay, the business part of this meeting is officially over. Let's dish. And then she would ask about, all these people on TV. Did she have a nose job? Did her husband really leave her? I mean, and then she would ask about the theaters and all the different things that were going on around town, because between the 5 of us, we had a pretty good handle, certainly on the entertainment world. So, and then we would ask her stories about all the society things she had done and which of the society doyens were the hardest to work with. And it was just a big love fest. But again, it was like one of those things, you were at this dinner and you're looking around going, I don't know how I got here, but this is awesome. This is so fun.
So cool. And speaking of women in that world, Dorothy, Dorothy Fuldheim, so you spent some time with her.
I did. I started at the station in 81, and Dorothy, in 88, it was Dorothy's 91st birthday. And they asked me if I would do, it was something really different. And again, at that time, I was the executive producer of the station. They asked me if I would produce a 1-hour special about Dorothy in honor of her 91st birthday. But the event was actually going on that night at one of the hotels downtown. But the idea was, this is when satellite television was just starting. But what the idea was is they would beam the dinner and the ceremony for Dorothy live. It would go up to a satellite. It would land back in the control room at Channel 5. And I cut the show live, which is like really, so what happened?
Wrong there.
I mean, and I had 1 hour to cut it, because when I was cutting the last of the special, the first of the special was already airing. So what I had done was I had built all these packages, which are the little tape pieces inside specials that you see sometimes. So I had built like 6 or 8 packages with Dorothy, and I had used video that had been used before, and I had set them all up. I knew the order that they were going to go in. I had a pretty good idea of the order of which the Dorothy, because I had the lineup of the speakers and everything else. So I knew who was going when and stuff. So I knew where the packages were going. I started taking the stuff down, and I would say to the guy who was sitting next to me, okay, take from this phrase to this phrase, drop it in. And we, when I look back now, what we did was absolutely insane. I really was insane. But so we did it. And so that was like on a Friday night. And Monday I went into Dorothy's office and I said, Dorothy, did you like the show? And she said, it was fantastic. I had a chance to interview her as part of this special.
Okay.
And she told me all kinds of stories. And I'm sure many, many people have heard this story, but she told it to me personally. Right. She told me that back in like maybe 37 or 38, before the Kristallnacht had taken place, she was working for a radio station in Milwaukee. And she was raised German. By her parents had come over straight from Germany. So she was very fluent in German. They only spoke German in their house. She was a sickly child, so she had stayed a lot of time reading and listening to the radio. And she was fascinated by radio. So she ended up going into radio. And she asked her boss if she could have permission to go and interview this world leader who was coming to power, Adolf Hitler. So they let her go, believe it or not. She flew to Germany. And when she landed in Germany, she found out that he had canceled the interview. Well, she was so mad that she found out where he lived. And she went and stood in front of his house in his front yard. And she didn't have recording equipment with her. It was 1937, 38. You had to be in a studio or whatever. But she waited until he got out of his car. And she said, Herr Hitler, you were supposed to do an interview with me. And she said, he stood and talked to me for quite a while. And she said, I came back and I went on the radio and I said, this man will be the bane of mankind.
Oh, wow.
She said, I think we both know that I was right.
Yeah.
you know? And so, but she told stories about how she told me the story that in 1955, when they decided to make her a newswoman at Channel 5, and there was not another woman doing news, right? Well, the sponsor, if you can imagine this, the sponsor of the 6 p.m. news was Duquesne Beer.
Ah,
And the agent from Duquesne, from Pittsburgh, went back to his boss and said, "Oh my gosh, they are making a woman the newscaster." And his boss said, "Don't worry about it. She'll last 6 weeks. They'll take her off. Not to worry." What she said to me, "Well, my dear, I lasted 18 years and they sponsored me every single one of those years." So, I mean, she was just filled with great stories.
yeah.
And so when I came in and asked her about the birthday special, Dorothy's famous thing was Dorothy loved chocolate, loved chocolate. But Dorothy had 3 drawers. There was the okay chocolate, there was the pretty good chocolate, and then there was the really expensive kick butt chocolate. That was in the bottom drawer. So sometimes when you would go in, like when I did the interview for her special, she opened the top drawer and said, "Would you like me some chocolate?" And of course, you always took it because you never would say no.
I,
After I did the special, I came in and she said, "My dear, sit down. Let's talk about this. Would you like chocolate?" And she leaned over and she opened the 3rd drawer. I
oh,
just thought, I've arrived. I felt so special. So,
what brands were in that drawer?
you know what? I don't even remember, but actually my 2 favorite stories about Dorothy and Dorothy with eating. One is that Dorothy unfortunately had a stroke when she was 91, but lived until she was 96. Dorothy hated protein, fruit, and vegetables. And so when you would sometimes as a producer be asked to run over and get Dorothy lunch, it was French fries and a chocolate milkshake. Dorothy lived on junk food. It was fantastic. And then years later, one of the cameramen said, "Well, had you worked when she was working the 11 o'clock news earlier on?" He said she used to send us down to the corner store to buy her beer, but it had to be in a brown bag. And he said you'd come back and she'd say, "Sit down." And he said she'd crack her beer and she'd sit drink it in the brown bag. She didn't want anybody to see her drinking beer. So, I mean, she was just a renegade of a woman. Think
Yeah.
about this. This would have been the 60s. She's drinking beer. He said she smoked cigars. She'd put her feet up on the desk. I mean, she was just such a different person.
Well, I mean,
Um,
just the story with Hitler. I mean, she could have just gotten back on the plane and headed out. Um, and she was not gonna take that. And I adore that.
Well, one of the things that really tell you the kind of person she was. Number one, her daughter was born, I believe her daughter was born in either the 19 teens or the 1920s. She named her daughter Dorothy Full-Time Jr. because she said if men can have a junior, why can't women have a junior?
yes. Oh, I
So
love that.
Dorothy Full-Time Jr., no one ever called her Dorothy. Everyone called her Junior. Everyone. So Junior, and then Junior was married a brief time, had a daughter who was unfortunately had a lot of medical issues. And unfortunately, Dorothy Full-Time Jr. died before Dorothy Full-Time Sr. And it was one of the most famous commentaries she ever did. It was called "The Death of My Daughter," and if you look it up online, I'm sure it'll be there. And it was just brutal to watch. I remember watching it when they were taping it, and it was just people were sobbing in the studio. It was so beautiful, but it was just so heart-wrenchingly painful to have her go through that.
Uh,
So, but I mean, she really, and then she told me the story. I said, "Dorothy, you must have had an opportunity to go to the networks. You had to have." And I said, what kept you at Channel 5? She said, "You want to know what kept me there?" She said the head of Scripps at the time was a gentleman named Don Paris, who in fact Scripps was at the time headquartered in Cleveland. Don Paris was from Cleveland. And so she said, "I don't know if you remember this, dear, but in 1970, there was a shooting at Kent State." I said, "Oh, I remember it, Dorothy." And she said, "Well, I went on the air and I said, those children were murdered. I said, these children were murdered." And she said, the station, within one day, the station had gotten 10,000 letters demanding that I be fired. And she said, after a day or two, Don Paris came down from the 3rd floor and he walked to my office. And she said, I stood up. And it must have been funny too, because Dorothy was about 4'9" and Don Paris was about 6'3". She said, I stood up and she said, "Don, I will understand it if you tell me that you're going to have to let me go. I've seen the firestorm that I caused. And he said, Dorothy, sit down. I think you're 10 feet tall.
Oh,
And then
wow.
she said to me, do you think I'd leave a guy like that? A
Uh,
guy stood up for me. She said, I made my decision at that time that I would never leave him.
wow. How
Isn't that a whole
incredible.
story?
Do you feel that her tenacity helped you in your journey
Oh,
through?
I think it helped probably every woman whoever came in. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you my last Dorothy story.
Oh, there's
Uh,
stories.
4 days,
But
4 days before Dorothy had the stroke. And it was on the air. She was interviewing Ronald Reagan and the director, who was a great friend of hers. And so behind her back, everyone at the station called her mother. She didn't know it. Well, I'm sure she probably did know, but she acted like she didn't know it. And this director had been there from the very beginning, and his nickname was Dad. And Dad was directing this interview, and he turned to the producer and he said, stop the interview. She was interviewing Reagan. He goes, stop the interview. Stop the interview. Something's wrong with Mother. And the producer said, what? Don, it's Dad, it's the president. He said, stop the interview. So they said, we're going to wrap up the interview. And they wrapped it up. He ripped off his headset, flew to there and picked her up, carried her. Someone called 911, and she had a massive stroke live on the, unbeknownst to, Ronald Reagan or anybody else. But 4 days before that, we were walking down the prop room at Channel 5. And Dorothy was infamous for wearing evening gowns. That was her big thing. And this was 1989. So we're walking down the prop room. And I was complaining about some guy I was dating. And she stopped and she said, my dear, I understand exactly what you're going through. And I said to her, Dorothy, you're 91 years old, and there are tons of men in their 70s who would die to go out with you. I said, May-December relationships are very hot right now. She put her hands on her hips and she said, my dear, I like older men, and there are very few of them around. Of course, I started laughing, and that was my last conversation with Dorothy.
oh,
But isn't that a great memory? I mean,
yeah,
she left me with a phenomenal memory.
yeah.
So
Oh,
she was pretty special.
what was the most awkward moment interaction with a celebrity or a?
Oh my God, there were so many. you know, I mean, when you're doing that many segments, the better one was everyone had everyone had a segment that they really wished they hadn't booked. Mine was that I had booked these Turkish rug weavers because I'd seen their work and it was so beautiful. And we got them in the studio that day, and we were talking with the person who had brought them in, I booked them with and everything. And they were putting microphones on them, and she had to leave. And so I said, well, are you coming back? She said, I'll be back. And, like a half an hour, I'll be back. But what she didn't tell me was none of them spoke English. None of them. And we're live on the air. And Fred's like, when did you first get into weaving? And they were like, and you're like, oh, okay. So Fred used the information I'd given, and he basically interviewed himself. He just started.
My gosh.
We once had I will never forget this either. These were the symbols backstage. Okay. So there was always a producer in the booth and at least one producer on the floor. And there was usually the third producer was usually screening phone calls in the booth. But so when the floor director goes like this, it means you have 30 seconds left in the interview. They go like this 1 minute, then they go like this. That's 30 seconds. When you get to about 10 seconds, they start going like this. Wind it up, wind it up, wind it up. Well, we had a guest who was Mark Twain, and he believed he was Mark Twain. So Fred's trying to interview, and every time Fred tried to close the interview, Mark Twain kept going. So we were getting into trouble because we were really running over. So I was on the floor. And so I walked into Fred's site and I went, like, cut it, just dump it, get out. And he tried, and so then I went like this. And then he started laughing. He said, you know what, Mark? We've got to end the interview. And so he got out. But we always laugh because this was the final straws. If you choked yourself, only in Fred's eyes, view, because you didn't want guests to know that.
Right, right. So as a producer, you're working with their people to book them?
Yeah. And it could be authors, it could be celebrities, it could be people from local universities, it could be people, I was doing an MBA at the time. I would call Harvard and say, so is Dr. So-and-so available to come and talk about economics? Yeah, and we would fly these people in. And the other thing I did was I had every week I would go to the drugstore and I would buy the National Enquirer and the Globe and like two or three other ones like that. And I would look for different crazy things. Like I once had a psychic window washer. And then I got a guy was a vampire from Buffalo. I would find these wacky, wacky people because again, when you're booking 10 hours a week,
Right.
I mean, and you could only do so much cooking. We did a lot of cooking, as you can imagine, partially because Fred was so into cooking. And we did a lot of doctors. And my sort of beats were medical, entertainment, and wackiness. But yeah, it was just morning exchange was like probably the most fun job I had of
And,
all of them.
they say that the stars always are requesting the weirdest thing in their dressing room. Did you get to be a part of any of that stuff, like their riders or their?
Not the riders. They didn't have riders, obviously, but I will now remember again, this would have been maybe 1982 or 83. And there's an actor who has since passed away, but he was a rocket hot actor on General Hospital. I probably shouldn't say his name, so I'll just say his character name, Scorpio. But his wife, it wasn't him. He wasn't my problem. My problem was the wife. At 1 o'clock on a Sunday night, I get a call at my apartment. I was living in Lakewood. I get a call at my apartment, and they tell me that Mrs. Rogers needs scotch, and the hotel bar is closed, and they will not bring a bottle of scotch to her room. And I said to him, it's 1 o'clock on a Sunday night. And he goes, right. So just go to a liquor store. And I said, this is Cleveland, Ohio. Liquor stores are not open at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday night. And I could hear her screaming in the background. And he said, well, I'm just going to have a real problem on my hands. And I said, I'm really sorry, but had I known that earlier in the week, I could have accommodated. There's nothing I could do. So he rang off. The next morning, I get a call from the limo driver. Mrs. Blah, blah, won't come out of the hotel because she said the limousine isn't big enough. There were two of them. And what had happened was this guy had jettisoned to very popular status. And what I found in my years in the business is that the people who have that flash in the pan success tend to be the ones that have the biggest egos, and they become the biggest problem for you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people like a Debbie Reynolds couldn't have been kinder, couldn't have been nicer. Milton Berle couldn't have been nicer. I think of other people that, Hillary Clinton couldn't have been nicer. I mean, we had all kinds of politicians that came through and astronauts. And I mean, it was over the course of the 17 years that I was basically involved with that show. I mean, the number of people, my greatest regret is that I didn't keep a journal.
Oh, yes.
Could you have imagined if you remembered all? I mean, I know I've forgotten way more than I'll ever remember. The things I remember obviously are the really funny things and the things where things didn't go right. Like there's a very famous clip, it's all over the internet, where we had a guest on the show who had a kangaroo that was going to do a boxing match in Public Hall. And the kangaroo got mad at the handler, reared back on its tail, and kicked the handler, and he went airborne. He went and landed. And Fred, because of when you had any kind of an animal act, you always had to ask the question, are they an endangered species? So Fred goes over and picks this guy up off the ground and he said, by the way, are they an endangered species? And the handler said, they are right now. And we all started, but you could literally see the camera shaking. People were laughing. So
it was such a time where they were so iconic.
Oh, yeah.
Locally, they were so famous. Like, the everybody that you're naming, they just were so famous in Cleveland. Like you knew who they were, and you just don't. There's so many ways to view news, and there's so many different outlets now that you don't feel that intimate with the host.
Well, the crazy thing too is satellite television changed everything because now TV stars and movie stars didn't need to come to Cleveland. Big authors didn't need to come to Cleveland. They could sit in their home and do 9 interviews in an hour and a half and be done with it. They didn't have to get on a plane and travel. And there were still people who believed in it for a long time, but it really, really changed the way we did television. And it was really weird. So I found out when I became the executive producer of the show in like the end of 1988, what I found out was they said, oh, we've cut the budget. Now, remember, when I was an associate producer from 81 to 84, I had no idea what the budget was. All I knew is I could do anything I wanted.
Right.
So I said, what do you mean? And you have to understand, remember, I was at the time making $9,000 a year. I was like, what do you mean you cut the budget? And Webster said to me, well, we had to cut it to 750. And I said, 750? And he goes, yeah, 750,000. And I looked at him, I said, dollars? And he said, Terry, it used to be $1 million. I mean, if you think about it, in 1981, $1 million for a travel and guest budget was unheard of. But there was, to your point, no competition.
Right.
The Morning Exchange owned 52% of the available viewing audience every single day. Every single day. So it's crazy to me, Molly. I will go to places like a Sam's Club or I'll be in Discount Drug Mart and somebody will come up to me and say, are you Terry from the Morning Exchange? And it's so funny to me. I mean, think about that. The show's been off the air since 1999. So it's crazy to me. But then when it went off the air in 99, I was already at Channel 3. And they let Fred go that day. Just the guy who was the GM was not a good guy. And he let him go. So I went to my boss at Channel 3 and said, I can make you a lot of money right now. And he said, what do you mean? I said, give me 15 minutes inside the noon news. Let me start a show called 15 Minutes with Fred. And I said, I could sell it for a lot of money. And he's like, well, I go, honestly, if I'm wrong, you take it off the air. I said, but here's the deal. One segment I sell, one segment I get to program, because if we just make it all sales, it won't work. It has to have some meat on the bone. So that was the deal we made. And the first year on 15 Minutes of Time in 2000, we made $400,000, which back then was like $1 million today. So and because I went to people and said, can you believe they kicked Fred off the air? Would you give me money to put it back on the air? And of course, everyone opened their pocketbooks and said, sure.
And when you're saying everyone, like, who are you talking about? Like, are these local companies? Are they national companies?
As a matter of fact, I went to the Cuyahoga County Public Library. They were the first sponsor I got because they loved him. I went to University Hospitals. They were the second sponsor. I had 4 sponsors. I had a lawyer. It was probably, no, it wasn't Armin Budish, because by then I had started Golden Opportunities with Armin Budish. Again, I created a show for him on Channel 3. And then I don't remember who the other 2 were. One probably was a law firm, though, or an accounting firm. And but it was crazy because that then became a show called Studio 3, which Fred did with Holly Strano, who was brand new to Channel 3 in 2002. And then in 2004, we created a show called Good Company that was 90 minutes long. That was Fred and Eileen McShay, who at one point had worked as a weather person at Channel 3, Michael Cardamone, and a woman named Andrea Vecchio, who had actually been the producer of Studio 3. So that show stayed on the air for like 8 years. And Fred and I had a deal because he was 70 when he started in 2000. And so our deal was that if at any point either one of us felt that he was being a little bit doddering, that he would leave the show. Because I said to him, I'm not going to let you stay too long. I'm not going to let people be saying, oh, he shouldn't be on the air anymore. I'm just not going to do it. So, because there were a couple of people in town who had done that. They just stayed too long at the party. So we made a deal. And so in 2012, Fred was beginning to forget things in the middle of interviews and stuff like that. So I called down to I was in my office and I called down to the studio and said, would you ask Fred to come up and see me? And he came around the corner and he said, before you say anything, it's time for me to leave. He said, I'm forgetting things in the middle of interviews. And I said, oh, I hadn't noticed. And we both started laughing. And so, but you know what? I was super lucky because that was 2012. And Fred passed away in 2019, but I kept him in my life. And I made sure to go see him and Linda. And we would go out to dinner or I'd take him out to lunch or whatever. But I made sure to keep him in my life because he was just someone who was extraordinarily special to me. He had been a mentor. He had been, he taught me so much about television. So I was really, as I said, to someone at the funeral, I was like, I was the smart one. I figured out a way to keep him in my life for 38 years. I was pretty good on my part. So.
What would be something that people wouldn't know about television and producing a show, or like the behind the scenes that maybe you wouldn't know that goes
Well,
on?
it's if you're doing. I love live television. I had many, many opportunities to take shows and tape them, and I always turned it down because I love live television because it's a lot like live theater. You don't know if everyone's going to remember what they're supposed to do. You don't know if the props are going to be there. You don't know how it's going to work out. But the years that I spent on the morning exchange, remember, I came in there with no real television experience. So I literally learned on the ground. But what I learned was the stuff that was the most organic, the stuff that was the most real, was the stuff that resonated the most with audiences. Mm-hmm. So the big thing about live television is that you're like, on a wire. You just don't know whether it's going to work or not work. Right. But I always felt I've always felt bad when people would, like, if there was a quote unquote producer failure, like you didn't find out that the Turkish rug weavers didn't speak English. But I always felt bad because people would blame the talent. How could Fred be so stupid? And the truth of the matter was, I always used to tell young producers, just remember, they're the performers, but we're the net. We're the one that makes sure they never hit the ground. So if there's a failure on the show, it's our fault. Even they didn't prepare for an interview, it's our fault. But Fred taught me also, and it was such an important lesson to learn. He taught me that the best interviewers are the ones who listen. There were many, many times when we would, all the producers would spend, really a long time crafting an interview, and we would give that to them on these orange pieces of paper. There was construction paper, these regular sized pages, and of course we had to hand type them on typewriters. There was no computers or anything, so you could spend, easily 12 hours a day at work for $9,000 a year, but then you'd hand it off to Fred, especially Fred, some of the others, but really especially Fred. And he would use the first question and never look back at the interview. And there were many, many producers who were very frustrated by it, but he had taught me really early on that if you listen, he used to say to me, an interview is a live thing. It's a live organism, and you have to let it go where it's supposed to go. And I had people in my career who, like someone would say, and then my sister fell off a bridge and died, and I was devastated. And then they say, what's the premise of the book?
Right. They're not listening.
They're not listening because they're too busy planning their next question. And they were abject failures at it. And and the thing was about it too, is he was such a gracious person. He would never, he might quietly say to a producer, either, you understand why I took it where I took it, right? Or he would say to a co-host who maybe he felt wasn't listening, he'd give them this little lecture about, it's a live thing. Like we always used to laugh. And there were many people who used to kind of tease about it and mock him a little bit about it. It's not a live organism. But he said, no, it is a live organism. And you need to understand that. I think he truly was one of the greatest interviews I ever met. He really was. And a lot of people don't know this, but this is a true story I found out. In 1986, I worked with ABC to bring Good Morning America to Cleveland. We did the show live on the top of City Hall. And Don Webster and I had gone into New York and did this big pitch to bring and I was working in news at that point, but we did a big pitch to bring Good Morning America live, because we knew that Good Morning America was based off of the Morning Exchange. In 1970, maybe 71, there was a producer named Woody Frazier. He had been the producer of the Mike Douglas Show. He went on to be the producer of the Home Show and the Richard Simmons Show. He was a prolific television producer. But anyways, Woody came to Cleveland and sat in the Morning Exchange studio for 2 weeks, taking notes. He went back to New York because they wanted to start a morning show, a 2-hour morning. He said, make it a 2-hour show. We're going to craft it after this. He was one of the original producers of Good Morning America. And he said, and I think we should bring this guy from Cleveland and make him the host. And the network execs were like, you know what, that's not going to work. We can't take some guy out of Cleveland, Ohio. Do us a favor, go out and find a movie star or a TV star or somebody who looks and acts like this guy. They've got to be out there. So Woody went to LA and did a lot of research and stuff and found David Hartman, who had been doing a show called The Doctors on one of the networks. And so they brought him to New York and they talked to him and he accepted the job. And so that show started, Morning Exchange started in 72. I think Good Morning America started maybe in 74, 76, somewhere in there.
Was it to model Fred?
No, yes, it was to model after Fred.
Oh
It was find someone who everyone will know who's exactly this guy.
wow.
So flash forward. Now, Morning Exchange bumped the first hour of Good Morning America for years and years, until like 1992. But so 1996, Good Morning America comes. We give them the full 2 hours because they came to our territory and we only did a 1 hour Morning Exchange that day. But I was there on the roof before the Good Morning America started. So it was probably like 6:30, 6:15, but we had all of our talent there already. David Hartman comes out the door off the top of City Hall. He walks, he doesn't look at anybody, doesn't talk to anybody. He beeline straight for Fred. He put his hand out. He said, I just want to say thank you. Because of you, I have the greatest job in the world.
Wow.
He went on to tell the story about how he got his job in Good Morning America because the producers thought he looked and acted like Fred.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Well, I had my own Good Morning America experience because they came to Chagrin Falls and they taped at the Inn of Chagrin. So we got to house the talent and we got to be on Good Morning America. And what was super cool was my daughter lives in New York City and she got to watch it and take pictures on the Jumbotron. So there's Inn of Chagrin and her mother up on the Jumbotron.
Who were the hosts at the time?
You know what? The person that they sent for, I was kind of bummed because I had hoped that George, yeah.
Oh, George Stephanopoulos.
I thought that would make sense. He's from the area and it was Asan, I can't think of what his last name is. Kind of like
here's a great story that the 6 degrees of separation. George Stephanopoulos' father married Fred and Linda Griffith.
Oh my gosh.
He's the minister. He married Fred and Linda Griffith. Isn't it a weird small world?
They were from Orange, right?
Yeah.
Did you go to Orange High School?
But Fred knew George's father.
That's crazy.
I know. There's so many of those like crazy like stories.
About what the ultimate fan out, like I can't believe, I know you mentioned a few, but there's got to be one where you just said, I absolutely can't believe I'm standing here.
I ended up for 4 years also being on the radio with a guy named Trapper Jack.
Jack, yes.
My favorite human beings on earth. And again, one of those weird situations, Robin Bensley left. I was feeding him people to fill in. And one day he said to me, why don't you come in and do a day with me? And I was like, dude, I'm not on the air. He's like, no, really, come in. We laughed so hard for the whole 4 hours of that show that he said, we have to find a way. You have to come and do the show. And so he said, just do a week with me. If I'm wrong, but do a week with me. So I did the week between Christmas and New Year's with them, he and Jim McIntyre. And we just had so much fun. But I had at the time 2 young teenagers. I was a single mother. I had 2 young teenagers. And I said, there's no way I could do this. I'm not going to find someone to come in my house. I get my hand to God. I get home that day and my phone rings. And this young woman says to me, this is Ade Brahanu. My mother is one of your friend Liz's best friends. And Liz just told me that you're looking for someone who would come to your house at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I am. And she said, well, I'm a student at Tri-C. My classes start at 9. I'd be happy to do this. And I literally was like, are you kidding me? And she was like, no. I said, you understand this is 5 days a week. You can't let me down. I'm going to be live on the radio. Totally understand that, Terry. Not a problem. She would come to my house at like 4 o'clock, 4:15. And the minute she walked in, I walked out. By that time, I had already walked my dog, packed the lunches, checked everybody's stuff, made sure. And I would get to the radio station at like 5 to 5. We went on the air from 5 until 9. My deal with Brooke Spectorski, who was the general manager of Channel 3, was because he said I could talk about Channel 3 as much as I want. And Brooke was like, look, if you want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're an idiot. Go ahead and do it. And he said, but I need you from 9 until 5. And I was like, that's not a problem for me. So, because I was trying to get enough money to put my kids through college with no debt. So I took the job at the radio station, and it was just like one of the craziest things. But there was a day at the radio station where I stood there and I looked, and Will Smith was standing next to me, and he had just done a movie and he just put out a new single and everything. And he was standing right next to me, and I was like, this is like one of the most insane moments of my entire life. I'm talking to Will Smith like we're best friends. It was just nuts. It was nuts.
He,
And then more recently than that, right before COVID, and this is going to sound so waggy, but my son really turned me on to a lot of hip hop music and stuff like that. Snoop Dogg came to Cleveland.
oh my, see, I
And
have
we
Snoop Elf on the Shelf. Our Elf on the Shelf is Snoop Dogg.
love it. Well, Snoop came to the Good Company show, and the deal that we made with them is that I would be the handler and that I would get Snoop in on the show, and then I would get Snoop off the set and out the door. But I said to her, listen to me, there are a lot of people who work really hard at this station, and they're going to want to take a picture with Snoop. And I'm going to put tape in right after him, and I will move people in and out, in and out. And I said, I will run it like a machine, but you have to let me do this. And that's the give on my part. No one will talk to him on his way in. No one will talk to him on his way out. But you have to give that to me. And she's like, well, I will be running a clock. She was real mean. And the bigger they are, the meaner the press people are, because that way they never have to be mean.
Yes.
They never have to be rude to you because the press person will do it for them. So I was like, that's fine. So I had put out a memo and said, if you want a picture with Snoop, show up in the studio. This is the deal. You can't talk to him. You can't chat with him about his rate music or anything. You just got to go in, get a picture, get out. So we had a guy from our art department had a camera and snapped all these pictures. And she's over there tapping her watch. And I was like, and then I took him outside. I just walked him past everybody. And I was like, I'm sorry, Snoop's done. He's got to go. He's got another gig. Walked him outside. And he turned to me and he goes, "Little mama, you kind of cool." And I said, "You're very sweet." And he goes, "Little mama, before I leave, is there anything I can do for you?" Well, my son, who is the one who introduced me to all Snoop's music, was a student at University of Cincinnati. I said, could I do a video? Would you do a video for my son? He goes, in a heartbeat. So I lift up my camera, my phone, and he goes, "Little dude, I'm here with your mama. She pretty cool. I bet she even let you smoke blunts." And I was like, I didn't want to laugh because I thought, don't shake the camera. He goes, "You got a good one, little man. You got a good one." And that was the day I said it to my son. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. You know what all I could think of was, though? Can you imagine? I was mortified. He said, "I bet your mama let you smoke blunts in the house." I was like, "Are you killing me, Snoop?"
That's his thing.
He was so sweet. He was so kind. And I will tell you that the guy that you see on The Voice these days, that's who he is. He's very emotional. He's very real. And he was really funny because people said, "Oh, you're so terrific." And he's like, "It's easy to do when you're high." I don't think he was high. As a matter of fact, I bet my soul he wasn't high.
Oh, that's funny.
But there was so many. Like I said to you, don't I wish I had journaled. So
would somebody now be able to go through your journey without having, you need like an NDA at this point.
No, the day and the age is truly gone. Television is undergoing a mass change right now. It's just streaming. Which I get, it should have gone 10 years ago, but it didn't. And you know what? It's just one of those things, Molly, where I look back and I'm so deeply grateful and so deeply humbled that I could stay in one city. I was involved in the business for 43 years, 2 different stations with fantastic people. The people that work at these TV stations who none of you ever meet or see. But you see their work all the time. They're just a phenomenal group of people. They really are. They just, and it's a family. It's a big family because really all the TV stations know each other.
Right.
And so it's a big family, but right now it's changing so dramatically. And no, because I knew in 1999 when I left Channel 5 that the morning exchange would cease to be. You know what I mean? I knew it. The writing was on the wall. Advertorial TV. I just heard whispers about it, which is why the whole 15 Minutes with Fred was my first foray into advertorial TV. Advertorial TV now, in my opinion, I wanted to take the show off the air 5 years ago, but they left it on because the sales department wanted it. But it had run its course. Like all things, they run their course. And
Right.
now streaming is the new thing. And that's why you're seeing this massive move towards, WKYC Plus, Fox 8 Plus, Woo's Plus, because that's where it's going to go and that's where it's going to live. Because look at all of us and look at how many people of us, we live our lives watching streaming shows.
No.
So why would we think our news was going to go there?
Right. So you were just in it at the perfect time.
You know what? The timing was unbelievable. And I always tell young people who are going into the business, I really encourage them to go ahead and still go in because it's like the new frontier now. You get to be at the very beginning and you get to be where the guys were in the 50s when no one knew what they were doing. Everyone was trying to figure it out. It was all live. But I feel like I never woke up in 43 years and didn't want to go to work. And I think that's really unusual. And it didn't mean there weren't hard days, and there didn't mean there weren't days where I was knocking my head against a wall. There were, all kinds of frustrations. But the truth of the matter is, I loved it. It was the hardest thing in my entire career was walking away from it. It really was. But it was just time, and it was time to pass the mantle and, let the people who were going to do the streaming do the streaming.
What could we look forward to with Terry? What's
Well, I waited about a year. I thought I would hate retirement. For the record, I was wrong. I love it. The freedom is crazy. To look outside when it's a really bad weather day and you're like, haha, I don't have to drive to work. It's pretty good. But about for the past 5 or 6 years, even when I was working, I really felt like there was no programming for women over 50 or over 55. And I felt like there were so many things that I had run into that I would be like, oh my God, nobody ever told me this was going to happen. So my dear friend Robin Swoboda and I have been talking about this for years. And about 6 months ago, I started working on getting a podcast together, affectionately called Nobody Told Us, about all the things that nobody tells you about getting older and all the, and it's everything from medical stuff, legal stuff, beauty stuff, health and wellness stuff, financial stuff. I mean, that you start to have to navigate, and because I think we were a different generation, our moms for the most part were stay-at-home moms, and we were all working moms, and so we're navigating it differently, and certainly I think everybody could agree that the 70s now are not what the 70s were even 40, 50 years ago. People are looking for much fuller lives. So I'm trying to get this podcast off the ground. I'm hoping to launch it in January. It will be called Nobody Told Us. Hopefully it will be everywhere. And it's me, Robin Swoboda, and this fantastic woman who I adore named Elisa Smith, who is from Shaker. She's a nurse at Metro Health, but she has also got a lot of talent in her blood. Her older brother is Al Roker. And when Al was working in Cleveland back in the 80s, Elisa and her husband told him they wanted someplace really wonderful to raise a family. And he really encouraged them to move to Cleveland, and they did. And so she's been on the Today Show a bunch, and she sparkles. So it'll be the three of us, and some days it'll be two of us, and perhaps even one of us. I don't know. We haven't figured that out yet, but we're recording the first 4 episodes next week.
Okay. So,
we shall see what goes on.
I know exactly what you're talking about, though. Yours is going to be, I'm sure, more professional than mine will be.
I guess hey, girl, this is a whole new.
It is.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
I don't either, and I think I just love it because I've got I have worked very hard in my career. I used to be the executive director of the Chagrin Valley Chamber, and I'm always promoting for others. Promoting small businesses, supporting and promoting people. And I was just like, I just want something mine. I want to promote and do something for me. So that's what this is. So I'm just
it's awesome.
I'm having fun. All right. So we're going to do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Nothing painful, I promise. Coffee or cocktails?
Neither. Diet. All TV producers drink Diet Coke. It's kind of the law.
I love that. Diet Coke, if you're listening, I'm looking for a sponsor. So
there you go.
I think Coke would be a great sponsor.
Coke would be a great sponsor.
Can or 2 liter on that?
Could be either. Could
Really?
be regular Diet Coke or Coke Zero. No
Okay.
problem. I'm not picky.
Okay.
But I will tell you, in the olden days, the most common thing you would hear at a television show early in the morning was this, as they pop the tops on the cans, because there were no bottles at that point. And usually it wouldn't be a 2-liter bottle, it'd be a 20-ounce bottle. But I'm not particular.
Oh, that's funny. What would be one word that people would describe you? Jan said badass.
Um, Outgoing. I'm guessing.
That's an understatement. If you weren't in media, what would you be doing?
I have no idea. I can't imagine my life being different than it was. I really, like I said, I tripped into it, but it was where I was meant to be.
You were English major. Was the plan to be a teacher or anything?
No, I had no idea. I was a second semester junior and they told me I had to declare a major. And I said, what do I have the most credit hours in? They said, you have 27 hours in history. You need 30 to be a history major. I said, what do I have the least number of hours in? And they said, and they named all these things. And I said, okay, I'll be an English and history major. Now, remember, this is back in the liberal arts days. You didn't have to declare your major.
Right.
And said, I would like to be an English and a history major. And the counselor looked at me. She goes, you'd have to do 3 hours of history and 24 hours of English next year. I was like, okay. So I did. I took printing press. I took poetry. So when I got out, I really didn't know what I was going to do. So I took a job at the university in their PR office.
Favorite Cleveland restaurant?
Oh man, there's so many. Okay, from my small childhood onwards, it would have to be Geraci's.
Okay. All right. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Oh baby, I'm a morning person. I wake up like this.
I wrote.
Much to other people's chagrin, I wake up like this.
What is a song that instantly puts you in a good mood?
Alicia Keys, This Girl Is on Fire.
I love that. That's a very appropriate one for you. One thing on your bucket list that you still haven't done.
Oh wait, I want to retract. No, I'll add. My other song that I love and my sweet darling husband cannot stand is Happy by Pharrell. I love that song. I just love that song.
Catchy. It's very, very catchy. No, I get that. I get that. Mine actually is Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train.
Oh my God. Oh, that's great.
I lose it when I hear that song. And I am now obsessed with my goal guest is Youngblood. He's kind of like Ozzy's protege. He's a singer. And every episode I will be at Youngblood. Would you like to be my guest? I will be asking Youngblood to be my guest.
All right. After we're done, I'm going to give you somebody who lives in Chagrin Falls who might be able to make that happen.
I already know, and then she and her husband will be my guest. If we're talking about this, that I'm interviewing her next Tuesday. That's so funny. My daughter actually is in England. She took a cruise, the Queen Mary 2, the Queen Mary 2.
Oh, nice, yeah.
From New York City to England. He has a shop there, and she went there and FaceTimed me, and I was I was losing it. So one thing on your bucket list that you haven't checked off yet.
Oh gosh. Well, to go to Italy. That's big on the bucket list. Italy, definitely.
When are you going?
I was going to go this year, but we bought new windows instead.
I hear you.
Next year.
That needs to be a topic on your no one told us that your dreams are replaced by washing machines and for sure. What's a piece of advice that you live by?
2. One is be kind, and the other is always be careful the last words you say to someone, because they may be the last words you say to them.
Yeah.
My mom taught me that from when I was a little kid, and I always make sure never leave a conversation angry, never leave a conversation without, I think one of my strong suits, I think, as a manager, all the years that I managed people, was that I always found time to find them doing things right. Like I really made an effort to find people doing things right and to acknowledge they were doing things right. Partially because that way, when you had to make any kind of like a corrective statement or, tell them, hey, this didn't work out so good, they always did remember that you were also the first person to tell them when they were doing something right.
Right.
So
And,
I always try and leave people on a positive note.
and probably goes along with your be kind.
It
You know,
totally goes along with be kind, but I think we're all here sharing the planet, and I just think kindness goes a long way.
kindness matters. Okay, last question. You're at dinner. You have three people you can invite. They can be alive or dead. Who are you sitting with at your table?
Oh, wow, that is a hard question. Okay, one would definitely be Jesus, because I have lots of questions for him. Lots of questions for him. One would probably be someone from the medieval age. I don't know who. Perhaps a queen. Probably a queen.
Okay.
Maybe a real fiery queen. A queen that got in trouble. Maybe someone got beheaded. Because I'd
Okay.
really like to know, like, so what did it take to get beheaded? And the third one, honestly, actually, they'd probably be two and three, would be my parents.
Yeah.
I would love to see my parents again. I would love to sit at a dinner table with my parents, especially at this age. I lost my parents. They died within 6 months of each other, which was
Oh,
actually beautiful and wonderful and sweet. But I was 55 at that time. And I would love them to see where my life took me. I would just love them to tell me where to go and what to do next. You know what I mean? Just I miss just their advice.
was your dad proud after you going into the idiot?
Funny. It took a while,
Okay.
but when I produced a special that ended up winning all kinds of awards, I produced a special about the Holocaust, and the National Council of Jewish Women debuted it at the Civic Theater, and they well, it was at the Civic, and they put a screen up and everything, and they invited my parents, and my parents were sitting directly behind me, and when the credits were rolling and it said producer and writer, my dad leaned forward and he whispered in my ear, "I was wrong. Your
Oh,
work is important."
how cool is that?
Yeah,
Oh,
it was super cool. It was super, I also hit the jackpot with parents. I really did. I had wonderful parents. I've just been an exceptionally lucky person in my life.
yeah. I mean, I think it's a lot of hard work as well.
Well, maybe, but I really, I am so grateful for my life. I've been incredibly lucky.
Well, you have been an absolute joy to sit and talk with. Thank
Well,
you.
you have to say, well, you could have easily said, Terry, time out, shut up.
That's why I wanted it to be organic and just take it to where it went. And I'm just so thrilled to sat down. I mean, you're a joy. You're
Oh, thanks.
was right. You're a badass redhead.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity, Molly. It was really nice to meet you.
And nice to meet you.
Jan Jones is she's not just your agent, she's also a major fan of yours.
She's I love her. I love her to death.
Easy to love.
And you write your notes for me on interviewing and anything that I can do to.
Yeah, you know what we'll do? We'll sit down, we'll share stories once I get going.
I
All
would.
right, share stories.
We'll have Jim. We'll go out to lunch
All
or
right,
something.
deal. You have
Have
yourself a deal.
books together.
Well, thanks so much. And have a great time next week with that interview you're doing. She's
Yeah,
another one I adore.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.